There are many pressures on the park, including the nomadic herders that arrive each summer. Gujjars journey annually from the plains of the Punjab to the Deosai, bringing their large herds of livestock to feed on the rich summer pastures. Their life is a hard one, of the sort typically associated with nomadic people.
यही माल मवेशी, ये बकरी, घोड़ा, खच्चर, सफर करना, चलना। पहले हम बहुत ठीक थे, बड़ी अच्छी सहूलत थी हमारी। 47 के बाद अच्छे रहे हम। अभी हम तंग हो गए इसलिए कि महकमा जंगलात ने जगह जगह जंगल बंद कर दिए।
The herders are taking their livestock deeper into the bear's habitat every year.
इनसे शुरू में जब नेशनल पार्क बनने से ओवर द ईयर्स उनके ख़ानदान की डिवीज़न होती गई। एक घर से अब 10 घर बने हैं, 10 से 40 घर बने हैं, तो पार्क का एरिया तो जितना था उतना ही है।
In 2012, approximately 14,000 livestock grazed the pastures of the Deosai National Park. Scrub for fuel, with dire consequences.
यहाँ की जो कुकिंग वगैरह का सब कुछ उसी से करते हैं। उसका असल मसला ये है,
go and set up a program, talk to the Gujjar families, define where they're going to graze, how they're going to graze, how much of an area they're going to use. That has to be set up.
The biggest hazard they pose to the park, however, is the amount of shrub they cut. If the habitat is to be saved for the bears, cutting down the slow-growing Deosai flora at this rate cannot continue. But to enforce all these limitations will take far greater resources than the park authorities currently have. However, it's not just the Gujjars and their livestock who have an impact on the park. In recent years, a new phenomenon is bringing unwelcome pressure on the park's resources. Commercial herders have started to run large herds of livestock through the park.
As the prices of meat in the market have gone up, it's become commercial now. More animals mean taking away the habitat from the bears. The bears are now getting pushed away into corners.
As the livestock consumes the palatable plants, the composition of the plant species in the park is changing. In the Deosai National Park, the construction of roads and bridges is allowing for easier access across the plateau. In 2013, there were 28 human occupations in the park. 15 of these belonged to the Gujjars. But tourists also came up to enjoy summer in the park and set up camps here. In recent years, the Gilgit-Baltistan authorities have been persuaded that such development is beneficial, with little regard for the needs of the wildlife and fragile.
हमारी तैयारी तो इसका नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट ही होगा अनटिल एंड अनलेस अगर हम उनको प्रॉपर अवेयरनेस के साथ यहाँ ना भेजें.
Many of the tourists coming to the park, especially from the nearby areas, have very little understanding of good environmental behavior.
और अगर इसको प्रमोट किया जाए तो सही इंफॉर्मेशन के साथ किया जाए, सही कंसिडरेशन के साथ किया जाए कि जब लोग इधर आए उनका इधर कूड़ा फेंकने का दिल ना करे.
Instead of acting as caretakers of this stunning piece of national heritage, the visitors often inflict harm to it. Some light fires in the park and leave pools of trash, most of it being non-biodegradable. There is no system whatsoever for dealing with all this trash which they leave behind. That visitors from within the region don't need to pay to enter here.
हमने कभी उनके
There are many settlements in the valleys below the Deosai National Park. In the villages of Kharmang, Mantoka, Dapa, Shilla and Sudpara, the local people live a life of extreme hardship. Investment projects from donors are extremely hard to come by in this region, and little has changed here in the last 100 years.
हमारा यहाँ जो है सर्दियों में बहुत बड़ा मुश्किलात है. अक्टूबर में बर्फबारी शुरू हो जाती है. माल मवेशी को पालना बहुत बड़ा मुश्किल है. सर्दियों में यहाँ उनको चारे में ले जाने की तो बहुत बड़ा हुआ है, बर्फबारी की वजह से नहीं वहाँ नहीं पहुँचते हैं. और घास जो है हम लोग जो है तकरीबन मनों के हिसाब से बहुत बड़े बड़े टाल लगा के जमा कर लेते हैं. तकरीबन हमारा इस घास को जमा करने के लिए, जानवरों के घास जमा पूंजी के लिए हमारे लिए कम से कम जो है ये अप्रैल मई से लेकर आगे अक्टूबर तक जो है ये जितने महीने होता है उसमें जो हमारा पूरा वक्त उसी में लग जाता है इनको घास जमा करने के लिए.
The summer brings little respite. In these few months, all the tasks that will allow the villagers to endure the extreme, bitter cold of winter need to be completed. The valleys were once forested, but now the slopes are bare. Dung is the only source of fuel. The women spend long hours collecting and drying this. A back-breaking daily chore. The villagers rely heavily on their livestock to eke out a living. The men of the village have nowhere else to graze their livestock other than the lush meadows of the Deosai Plateau. When the park was created, they claimed traditional grazing rights, which had to be respected. In recent years, while the bear population has grown, so has the human population. And bears and livestock. The presence of humans in the bear's habitat is a reality, and local communities have to be integrated into conservation efforts.
One other initiative that we'd like to see put in place is the local communities join in the effort, own the national park, see it as their asset and their future. And
this type of inclusive program is just what the Himalayan Wildlife Foundation focused on in the past. The recovery of the bear population suggests the strategy was very successful.
कुछ नालों में इनके अटैक्स हैं.
Finding alternative sources of subsistence for the communities is also vital. Reducing their dependence on livestock will help to protect the bear's habitat. Such programs have been successful in other remote mountain communities. Fish farming was introduced in the Broghill Valley. But much more still needs to be done in order to preserve the bear's habitat. The increasing incursions by the Gujjars into additional park areas have to be addressed.
We have to work.
Strengthening the park's revenue stream is essential, and charging a small fee for all visitors could provide some of the funds the Wildlife Department desperately needs. The roads and structures that have been built are proving detrimental to the habitat and wildlife, which can thrive only where there is very little human activity. Once the precedent for building within the park is established, it's hard to stop. The needs of the park and its creatures could soon be completely overwhelmed as so-called development marches on. There's also an urgent need for environmental education for visitors to the Deosai and a stronger enforcement of park rules so that they don't damage this unique wilderness. To restore the park to its former pristine condition, a proper system of garbage disposal will need to be put in place.